TipTut.
Hello everybody and welcome back to TipTut. Today we're inside of After Effects. We're going to take a look at creating this motion graphic illustration style. This will be a beginner level tutorial. However, I recommend if you haven't opened up After Effects before, you go and watch my Intro to Motion Graphics series, which I'll link in the description below, as there'll be a few things which I won't speed through. I'll still explain them, but if this is the first time you're looking at After Effects, it might confuse you. So let's just jump right in then. It's quite a simple project this time around. We're going to be recreating this sort of lady floating on a lie-low effect that you see here. The reason for this is it gets you to grips with some of the basic tools like the pen tool, the shapes tool, and it also gets you to grips with applying effects to different layers and things as well. So it's a great starting point for these kind of illustration style motion graphics. So let's jump right in. I'm going to pop everything I've already done into a folder called Archive. And we're going to start again. So I'm going to create a new composition. This one's going to be 800 by 600 pixels, 24 frames a second, and about 5 seconds long. As long as your composition roughly matches that, you should be fine. Other common frame rates are 25 frames and 30 frames per second. So the first thing you're going to need to do is create the background image. Now, if you go up to Layer and New, and then Solid, this will create a basically background item, which you can pick a color for that is automatically the correct size of your composition. Now, I've already got my background color chosen here, so I'm just going to hit OK, and that's going to create our background. This we can lock using the lock icon down here because we're never going to edit it again. If you want to, you can you can click it and hit Enter to rename it to background, and then lock it up again. If you do accidentally end up clicking on something, double clicking like so, and you get this sort of red timeline here, that's just because you're inside of the layer. If you look up at your window here, you should see composition with the name of your composition, and you can click back there to get to the main subject. Up in my layers panel, I'm going to rename this to GIF export because we're going to be exporting this as a GIF. And if at any point during this tutorial series, you don't see any window that I have open, it may be a plugin, but I shouldn't be using any plugins, or you can just click Window and select it from the list here. So without any further ado, let's get started. The first thing we're going to look at creating is these background waves. So if I go back to my pre-made composition, you can see this kind of rippling shape here. And this is actually made up of a circle that we have applied some effects to. So just to show you what that looks like, we have a shape layer and you can see the outline of the circle here. And up in the effects palette, I've just applied some things like a little bit of noise and a little bit of turbulent displace, okay, to this circle. And the turbulent displace is what's making all of these ripples. Now, the noise in this instance probably isn't needed. I think I put that on just to test some things out. But if you turn it off, you can see there's not real difference because it's so subtle. So we're going to remove the noise from this one. All you need is turbulent displace. So go to your composition and we're going to draw a circle. Go up to your toolbar and click the ellipse tool icon. If you can't see that, you should see a rectangle or a rounded rectangle. Hold down on that item there and choose the ellipse tool. You can see you have a fill and a stroke. If you hold Alt and click on the stroke thumbnail until it goes to a red line, and if you click fill, you can then choose your fill color. Now, I am just going to go to my GIF that I've had before, double click like so, and I'm going to sample quickly this watercolor, just so that I've got the same color here. I'm going to copy that. Of course, this can be whatever color you want for your one, so it really doesn't matter. So you create a new circle and you click and drag in your composition to create that circle. If you hold Shift, it will constrain it to the correct proportions, 1:1. If you hold Control, it will grow it from where you first started clicking. So holding Control and Shift will grow it from where you clicked and scale it in proportion. When you let go and choose the selection tool, you can then see that you have your circle shape here, and you can snap that to anywhere you like in the composition as long as your snapping tool is on. If you go to your pan behind tool with the shortcut for which is Y, you can grab your anchor point and realign that to the center of your shape, but that's not absolutely necessary because it's not actually going to be moving. So let's go up to our fill, click this, and we're going to paste our color in. Now at the moment it's going to seem like a big leap to go from this to this, but it's actually not. It's very simple. All you need to do is to go to your effects and presets panel. Mine is up here. Yours might be in a different place. Again, if you just hit window, you can then scroll down to effects and presets and you should see it. Start typing in turbulent displace. If you type in turb, it will probably come up. You can then click and drag this onto your circle. And you can see that it's already going to smush into a weird shape. Now, by editing these settings up here, we can change what this is going to look like. We can increase the amount of turbulent displace, and you can see this is getting a bit more like what we want. We can increase or decrease the size of our turbulent displace. So you can see you get some really crazy stuff. And if you want to change how that looks over time, you can change the evolution, which just changes basically the start settings of what it is you're trying to go for. Okay, so I'm just going to undo everything I've just done. Now, our amount, we're going to want very high, but the easiest way to see how this affects it is to change the size first. And I'm going to change that down to about 10. What that does is it changes the overall size of your displacement. So it's either going to be a larger displacement when the number is larger, so smaller amounts of ridges, or a smaller number is going to give you these small bumps, which is what we're after. Now, if you start cranking the amount up, you can see where we start to get our effect from. So I'm going to crank this to about, let's try 3,500. That looks pretty good to me. But at the moment, it just stays still when we scrub through our timeline. So what I'm instead going to do is grab my evolution and drop a keyframe on that. Again, if you don't know what keyframes are, this is probably a bit of an advanced tutorial for you. So go and check out the Intro to Motion Graphics series. And I'm going to click on the keyframe of evolution. If I press U, that will bring it up in my layer palette. And then I'm going to scrub all the way to 5 seconds. And I'm going to say, evolve this 5 times completely around the wheel by the end of the 5 seconds. So that's once a second. That's going quite fast, but you can see the effect. And we should have the start point and end point looking different. Okay, because although it's gone 5 times around the wheel, that means that it's at a different starting coordinates than before. If you want the start and end point to look exactly the same, you need to bring this second keyframe back down to 0, 0. It's going a bit fast. Let's try 2 times around the whole wheel. That looks much better. Okay, there, pretty happy with that. Now, to get the effect that you saw here in this version, it's just very easy. What we're going to do is drop the opacity of this center one down to 75. So we're going to hit T, which brings up the opacity, and we're going to turn that to 75. And that just settles it in a bit. Then we're going to duplicate this, change the position of it. And as you can see, as we change the position, it already changes the pattern for us because the displacement is different. We're going to push this off to the side so it's a little bit more subtle. We might even scale the entire thing down because we don't want this one to be quite so powerful, because we're going to bring this one's opacity up to 100%. So this looks like the sun, or whatever it is that's causing the light to ripple across this water, is coming from this direction because it's stronger. If we then duplicate this layer, which we'll rename to mid, and this one to close, we'll duplicate the mid layer, drag it beneath and call it far. We can then bring the scale of this up and push the position way out over here. Like so. What we can also do is start playing with things like the size. So we can increase or decrease the size, or increase the amount of turbulence. Scale this back down a bit. Basically tweak this until you get a more subtle approach here. Okay, now that's creating all these kind of tiny dots around the center here. So I think I might have cranked that just a bit too far. So we're going to bring this back down a bit until some of those merge together. Perfect. This one, we'll hit T and change the opacity to 50%. Now that has created our background water, which looks pretty cool. I quite like that. Might bring this guy back in just a little bit. There we go. Looking pretty good. All right, happy with that. Now it's time to create our lady. And to do this, we're going to be using a combination of the shape tool and the pen tool to draw the woman in the ring. Now, I've actually sketched this out already. So if I go to my project, into my archive, you can see that I have a PNG of our sketched out woman, which I'm just going to scale down and pop in the middle. This is literally just a quick sketch that I did. If you want to try drawing yourself in a different pose, go ahead. If not, you can kind of just copy this one. What I'm going to do is just roughly position her in the scene. Maybe we'll make her a bit bigger this time around. And maybe we'll rotate her like so. It's just she's sitting a bit more central, she's a bit more of a focus. That is probably slightly too big. How about that? That looks pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to multiply, or I'm going to change it to one of these settings. I can't remember which one I used. I can just quickly check, although I did remove it. That basically allows that white light, there we go, maybe a soft light, that white light to turn see-through so I can create shapes underneath it. For example, if I go back up to our circle tool and I alt-click the fill until that disappears, and I remember what orange I wanted to use. So if I go back to my GIF here, and there's two types of orange. So I'm just going to go to my shape tool, go to the fill, and I'm going to grab this color value. I can go to my shape tool here. I can click my fill. I can paste it in there. Or this time I'll actually do it on the stroke. Let's do it on the stroke this time around. Okay, now that's going to create, if we click and drag our shape, a nice circle with a thick stroke around it. I'm going to get it to roughly the size that I want. And then I'm going to rename this to ring. Then I'm going to drag this below my sketch. And you can see how changing that color mode has helped me position and scale this ring according to the original drawing. So that's pretty close actually. Maybe we can drop this down to 98% scale. And yeah, pretty happy with that. So we're going to duplicate this ring and we're going to start looking at creating these darker orange segments. So we'll call this, let's just leave it a ring 2. And we're going to grab our stroke color and we're going to just drag the hue down a bit. So that changes the color. Now, if we hide this, we can see what we've done there, like so. We've just got two slightly different versions of the orange. If I twirl down this ring 2 and go to contents, ellipse 1, stroke 1, I can go down to the dashes submenu here and hit plus. And you can see already that that's going to add dashes to our circle. I can increase the number here to increase the size of each individual dash until I get an effect that I'm happy with. That looks pretty even. So we'll leave it at about 40. Nice round number. Actually, no, I think I prefer 41. There we go. Perfect. That is the ring completely done. 2 easy steps. That's what we like. So let's think about drawing the woman. Now we could draw her hat using the same way we did before with the turbulent displace. We could draw a perfect circle, add a slight turbulent displace to it, and it will sort of create this smushed circle that we saw. Or alternatively, we can use the pen tool. Now I'm just going to grab the color that I used before. So I'm going to go and just grab a shape so that I've got an eyedropper. And I'm going to take this code here. Basically, it's a slightly off-white. You can use, again, whatever colors you prefer. And this time, I'm going to grab my pen tool. Now, making sure I've got nothing selected, I'm going to alt-click on the stroke until that disappears. Click once on the fill and paste that in. That gives us our white fill here. Okay, so we are then going to start drawing the hat. Nothing crazy about this, just click and drag. So choose a point on the hat where you'd like to start, and left click. This will create a new shape layer, and then click at the next point, but click and drag this time. And that will create a curved line, and you can see how this is controlled by moving your mouse around. If you just click and drag for now, if you ever want to undo, you can just hit Control-Z and that will remove your last point. So if we just start clicking and dragging at different points around this hat, you can see how quickly and how easily we can build these rough kind of shapes. When you hover over the last segment, you can see the cursor changes from a pen to a pen with a small circle. When you click on drag on there, you'll start affecting both sides of that point, okay? So what you want to do is position it roughly where you need. Then if you hold Alt, you can actually control one individual point. So I'm just going to pop this like so. Then I can click and change these drag handles, click and move these points around until I'm happy. Once I'm happy with that shape, I'm going to call it hat base. And I'm going to pop it below the sketch. Again, that's a shortcut for that is Control, open or close square bracket to push those around. Okay. Now I can't see my sketch anymore, so I can probably turn this to multiply. And now that I've got some white behind it, that makes it a lot easier to see this sketch. Now, with the hat base selected, I'm going to, with the hat base finished, rather, I'm going to select my pen tool. And I'm going to just pick a slightly darker white. Now with no layers selected, I'm going to zoom in slightly. I can hold space to pan around inside this window. And I'm just going to roughly create a shape that looks like the shadow. Now you can see here, that if I were to leave the handles like this and come around here to draw my next point, I'm going to get this sort of strange bulge. The way to counteract that is when you draw this point, once you've got the line in a position you're happy with, you can hold down Alt. Okay, that will then change this line, which you can bring all the way around without affecting the shape. Releasing that then, when you come to draw the next line, it will create a sharp angle at that point of your choice. You can then do the same here. Okay, so you can finish it off like so. You can then grab your Alt key, drag this other handle around and tweak until you're happy. That looks pretty good. I might bring this around just a bit more. Maybe I'll bring out both of these, create a bit of a smoother, rounder shape. But otherwise, that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to call this one Hat Shade or Had Shade. And I'm going to push that below the sketch as well. If we hide the sketch for a second, we can see what we've come up with. There you go. Looks pretty good. Okay, let's start filling in the rest of this lady then. Now, this is pretty much the same process. You just grab your pen tool. You choose the color that you want. I think I did it in, a slightly darker shade of pink. So I'm just going to grab this color code here. Again, you can do whatever colors you want. It's your project, not mine. So I'm going to grab my fill, change it to this slightly darker color. And with my pen tool, I'm just going to start to trace your the lines from before. Now, you may have this situation here where you draw something and it lowers the quality whilst you're drawing it, and it's a bit distracting. It does this when it's trying to calculate so that it can do it faster for you. It's a thing called adaptive resolution, and it's there to help slower computers stay up with sort of hardcore After Effects files. If you don't like it, you can turn it off down here somewhere. This icon, fast previews. So I've got it to adaptive resolution. If you turn that off, it won't do that anymore. I quite like leaving it on because I do all sorts of things in here in After Effects. So we'll rename this layer left arm and we'll push that below the sketch. We'll also want to push it, however, below the hat, because otherwise you're going to get that weird bulge where we just finished it off. Do the same with the right arm on a new layer. You can do it on the same layer, but if you want to animate these separately, sometimes it's best to keep them on their own layers. You can also move these points around with the D-pad, which is what I just did there. And we're going to call this one right arm, and we're going to push that below the hat as well. Right, let's get drawing in our body then. Going to just come along here, and I'm just going to quickly, this isn't trying to be sort of anatomically accurate. It's meant to be a bit more stylized than that. So we can just do blobs for the feet. As long as they look curved and elegant, it's going to suit this illustration style. We can come out here. Let's have it actually come out a bit first, as if that's a bit of a calf. And then come back in like so. Curve out for the hips and underneath. Okay, now this one we'll call legs base, and I'll tell you why. Let's hit Control, open square bracket to push that below the legs, and you can see here that there's a gap between her legs where they've been crossed over. If I just draw this gap on a new shape layer first, I'll explain how we fix this. So again, using a combination of clicking and dragging and the Alt keys, I'm going to create a nice gap here, which could roughly look like the hole between some crossed over legs. We'll call this legs gap, and we'll push that below the sketch again. If we hide the sketch, you can see that at the moment we've got these two layers, but you can't obviously see them. If you select the legs base layer, and you should be able to see a column called track map. If you can't see that, you can hit this toggle switches modes button because you might be seeing your 3D controls. If you click this and choose alpha inverted matte legs gap, what this will do is it will basically take the layer that's directly above it, legs gap, and cut it out of the layer that's below it and then hide that layer. And you can see the result there. The result is we get this cut out back in the legs like so, okay? If we were to choose alpha matte non-inverted, it would leave the top layer on top and cut the bottom layer from out of it. That's obviously not what we want. We want the inverted one. Grab both of these layers and push them below the hat base. So the last thing is just to quickly draw in her knickers, because otherwise she'll be in the nud on her rubber ring in the ocean, which isn't any good. So we're just going to quickly hide this layer, eyedropper the hat color, and quickly draw in some pants. Like so. Now, if you wanted to, you could do the same technique with this layer as you did with the legs. So in fact, let's do that. Say, for example, I was a bit quick and sloppy with it. And I was like, there we go. And this will do. And then bam. You can see that this lady's pants sort of stretch off of the body a bit. So we can name this layer pants. For Americans, that's what we call underwear in England, just for those that are about to get all confused. So we're going to place our pants layer above the legs gap layer, like so, and then we're going to duplicate the legs base layer. Now we're going to drag the legs base 2 above the pants and remove this track mat. Then we're going to go to the pants layer and we're going to alpha mat the pants onto the legs, and that's going to cut off these extra shapes here, which means when we zoom out and we hide our layer, our lady is finished and she's bobbing along. Now, what we're going to do is grab all of these, including the image, and we're going to grab everything apart from the water, and we're going to pre-compose that, and we're going to call it lady. I'm going to call it lady too, because I've already got a lady, but you can just call it lady. If we go inside this now, what we can do is animate some of this tweaking a little bit. So we can grab our left arm, we can use our pan behind tool to change the anchor points of these arms. And maybe what we can do is select both of these, press R to bring up rotation and keyframe them. Roughly halfway through the composition, I'm going to tweak these just a little bit. Maybe this, or maybe this arm doesn't move actually. Maybe it's just the right arm because this one I didn't draw the hand for. So I'm just going to click that stopwatch again to remove all the keyframes. And on this right arm here, I'm just going to animate that to waft through the water a little bit. If I drag over this first keyframe, hit Control C to copy it, go to the end and hit Control V, we've now got a nice looping animation, like so. What I'm going to do is actually grab all these keyframes by clicking and dragging over them and hit F9. Like so, and that's going to ease them a little bit so that it drifts into place just and holds itself and then brings itself back up. Nice little subtle bit of movement there, which is just a nice addition. What we can do if we wanted to is we can then take our pants layer, take our legs base layer and grab this little pick whip tool here and click and drag that over the pants layer. That basically links this legs base and the pants and says wherever the pants moves your leg base. And I'm going to take my pants and I'm going to attach it to the legs base, and I'm going to take my legs gap and I'm going to attach that to the legs base. What this means is if I shift up the legs base, everything else moves with it. Grab my pan behind tool, pop this up near where the hips are. If it's giving you trouble, you can turn that snapping off and be a bit more accurate with it, like so. And this one, I'm just going to have her swinging her legs about a bit. So it's going to be here. Maybe at this point she is swinging her legs twice as fast. So she can keyframe here, and in between the two, we can just then have these rotate a little bit. So this time it will go left a touch, back to the center. If we copy these keyframes with Control C and then paste them with Control V, we can then go to this center one over here, but this time instead of it rotating one way, we're going to rotate it the other way. And then we can do the same thing. We can grab all these keyframes, click and drag over them, and hit F9. And she'll slowly move her legs between those positions, as if wafting through the water. So if we scrub through this at the moment, give it a quick play, we can see that she's moving her legs a little bit. But she herself isn't moving at all. And we're going to achieve that with a nice expression, a very easy expression. So don't get intimidated. We're going to press P with our lady layer composition selected. And we're going to press R, or we're going to press Shift R. Now that's going to bring up position and rotation. We're then going to hold down Alt and we're going to click position and rotation stopwatches. And you can see these transform dot position and transform dot rotation bits of code come up. Select one of those and type in this wiggle. Let's try 1, 5. Now we're going to put the 1 and a 5 inside of parentheses. So that'll be wiggle, open parentheses, 1, 5, close parentheses. Now let's just do that on the position for now and see what happens when we hit play. So you can see now that our lady, if I hide these layers, it's a bit easier to see. She's now bobbing around in the water a bit. Okay? Let's do the same thing for the rotation. Wiggle, open, 1,5, close. She's now going to be twisting around as well. You can see the whole ring is bobbing around in the water a little bit. So if we bring our layers back in, voila, there we go. And that is exactly it. That's how you create that random motion. So what that's basically doing is wiggling your position value every second by 5 pixels. Okay, and it's doing the same thing on the rotation. So if you wanted this to be really crazy, you could have her shooting all over the ocean by changing this value up. So here the water's getting a bit more choppy, and then all of a sudden she's in the middle of a storm. Oh, freaking out. You can see how that gets really crazy, yeah? So if we leave this value nice and low, there you go. You can see what happens. So that's pretty much it. If you want to export this, then I recommend using Adobe Media Exporter, which I've got, Adobe Media Encoder, which I've got a plugin, a lesson on for exporting GIFs. Or you can get a cool plugin called GIF Gun, and you can just click Make GIF and it'll make it for you. If you want to export this as a video, again, you can just use Adobe Media Encoder. And what I'll do is I'll just cut to that now to show you how easy it is. Okay, so I have Adobe Media Encoder open. What I'm going to do is have my Lady 2 composition selected, and I'm just going to go to Composition, Add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue. That's going to process the information and pop that into Adobe Media Encoder for us. And then you just need to choose your encode settings. You can pop this as H.264, which will create you an MP4, or you can go and click on this option here, which will open up the dynamic link server, which is needed for live compositions that you haven't exported already. And you can start playing with your options. Now, I've just realized I've grabbed the wrong composition here. This is just going to export Our Lady. So what I'm going to do is just delete this one. Choose yes, go through here and choose my GIF export, which has got the background in it. Instead of going through that menu, you can just click and drag and drop that into Media Encoder instead. You can then, of course, click on your export settings and change this to animated GIF. Now, it's important to note when you do so, it's going to choose some default settings you might not like. So the frame rate, for example, we don't want to be 1. We want to change that to the closest to our original version, which is 25 in this case. Make sure your width and height and quality are what you expect and hit OK. Then when you hit render, it's going to start exporting that for you. Now, I used GIF Gun for mine because I'll just show you. You can choose the settings. You can say frame rate, same as comp. You can resize it. You can choose a particular path. You can give it an alpha value. You can save it as a video. All you do for GIF Gun is you just click Make GIF and it makes a GIF for you. Much easier. Check it out. I think it's pretty cheap. If not, though, you can do it with Adobe Media Encoder. So you can click this. It opens up our finished GIF export. And using photos, we can give that a look. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. I do appreciate it. And I'll see you all next time on TipTut for another, hopefully, After Effects tutorial. See you then.
Remember to subscribe for more tips, tricks, and tutorials. Thanks for watching.